Alright, there we are. There's the results of the battle. As you can see, it's a little over 10% losses, which is actually fairly good. I do aim to have losses lower than that. Like I said, this strategy is about ending the battle quickly and minimizing losses on your side. Um, we'll take a look at the unit statistics. The kills, yep, you can see it's essentially split evenly between your gunpowder units and the ones and the spear units that saw the most action, essentially. Um, and it is a somewhat quick way to level up your gunpowder units. Most of the units are kind of difficult to level up quickly, and also they're the units that probably need to be leveled up as fast as possible, but that's not really the point of this tactic, but it is nice. Of course, some units can lose quite a lot of men with this strategy because, of course, they're fairly isolated. Unless, of course, you have some cavalry in order to back them up. I recommend some more dragoon-like cavalry that has both ranged gunpowder, but also can give a decent show of themselves in melee. So, as you saw earlier with this unit, that was getting absolutely pounded by, I believe, both the enemy general and the enemy's tercio Portuguese spear units at the same time. They lost more than half their unit. And if the battle had gone on for much longer, they might have actually broken, which is the reason why, as you would have seen, I brought some units up from behind in order to move forward in a spear square and take their place. Thankfully, the battle ended by that point, so it wasn't so much an issue, but that can happen. And I'll show you in the next recording that I'll do in a moment a potential solution to that, although it does require not a lot of micro, but a lot of pausing the game and making sure units are lined up perfectly. I tend to use that strategy a lot, pause the game and make sure my units are exactly where I want them to be, or going exactly where I want them to go, which I know isn't in the spirit of a lot of players of Total War, how they like to play, but that's simply how I play. If you can get this to work, the version of the strategy that I showed you, that this is the after action report of, doesn't require a lot of micro, virtually none. And the one I'm about to show you, it requires a little bit more because you have units within units and making sure they're perfectly lined up, because spear squares are a little fiddly, and you want, if you've got two units in a spear square, you want them to be exactly overlapped with each other instead of one hanging out the side and taking most of the damage, which kind of is what I tried to mitigate here. To have multiple units on top of each other, so if they do get hard pressed on every side and taking a lot of damage, it's a smaller, better unit in the center of it that's able to hold on longer, hopefully to the end of the battle, which I will show you now. Of course, the enemy did bring significantly less numbers than I had, less than half what I had. Mind you, armies were of the same cost for Master of Strategy. And they were all veteran samurai units, essentially, even through a few Portuguese spearmen in there, which are even harder to kill. So if this was much higher number, but it was Ashigaru, it actually would have gone easier, because Ashigaru break faster to gunpowder, as far as I can tell. Although perhaps argument could be made that with the smaller unit size and constant missile fire from armor piercing missile fire at that, that the samurai units will break faster, as a larger portion of the unit is dying per volley and therefore has more potential for morale shock. That would be an interesting point, but I digress. Essentially, the whole point being that it may not have been an accurate representation of exactly what the AI might bring against you in campaign, but these are, I do often like to go against worst case scenarios to kind of see how things stack up, which is exactly what this is, as I'll show you now. Because basically, the only time you take significant losses in a Total War, especially Shogun 2, and especially with the Master of Strategy mod, is when you either really don't know what you're doing, or you do know what you're doing and you just got really unlucky, like you've been ambushed by 2 stacks and your men are half dead from a battle you did 2 turns ago. So worst case scenario examples are valuable to kind of show that even in those scenarios, which unfortunately I can't decrease the amount of men per unit that units start with the custom battle, but if I was able to do that, I'd find a way to make this strategy work even with half your army dead, which is kind of the whole point of this. Making sure that you can win battles that you wouldn't be able to win usually, and the battles that you can win, that you win handedly. So this is a really good example because we're fighting Gestalt. Because Gestalt, as any Shogun 2 player would know, is very bow focused. I've given them a very bow focused army, so they in theory would have the missile advantage over me. Mind you, I do have some bows of my own that I have brought to this battle, and that is simply to help with mitigating their missile advantage, because if it wasn't for the fact that I brought bows, I don't believe I would have won this battle. But as we'll see here in a few moments, I'm spending time lining units up, and that's what I'm talking about, the pausing and making things line up. Essentially what I'm going to do is I'll have these couple units, well, I have all of my frontline spearmen in spear square, but within them I aim to have these 3 veteran Yari Samurai units at the core of those, in spear square, at the core of those spear squares, so a spear square inside a spear square, and the same with these Yari Ashigaru on the two flanks. But of course they don't have spear square formation, so I've had to settle for spear wall, which if I get the battle really going, we'll kind of see. There's a significant missile battle that goes on at the start of the battle, which isn't particularly relevant to this strategy because it's not really demonstrating what I'm intending to demonstrate, but I will show you anyway, because it was a bit of an interesting missile battle. Not that anything out of the ordinary happened, but I just found it interesting, and I will commentate over that. The reason why this is the worst case scenario, essentially, is especially when you're stacking units on top of each other, bow fire, but also in spear square, bow fire, receiving it, is quite deadly because you're putting a lot of your units, especially with a spear square, when you're not just compacting the unit on one front like you are with spear wall, but with spear square you're compacting them on every front, so it makes them really compact. It makes them really vulnerable to missile fire because it's only a couple volleys and the unit may have lost 25 to 50% of their man in the unit, depending on what unit you're taking fire from. If it's say a veteran samurai bow unit in conjunction with an Ashigaru unit, and that's one of the other missile theories you kind of want to know for Total War Shogun 2, especially with the Master Strategy mod, is to overlap high value missile units and overlap them with Ashigaru missile units, so you get both quality and quantity instead of going for a smaller total number of high quality units or a very large number of low quality units, because sometimes you need high quality missile units when you need something dead within the next couple of seconds, but for the majority of the battle you need just volume of fire, which is what Ashigaru, both Teppo Ashigaru and Bow Ashigaru are generally for in field armies. Just a little tidbit there in case whoever's watching this didn't know. So let's get the battle started here. Oh, there we go. The Shogun have taken a good position. Oh, jeez. Now I'm remembering this recording. Yes, I did quite a few points where I had to just pause the battle and move my entire army. So there will be abrupt pauses like that where it's processing all the movement orders I've just given in the span of one tick. So, I have brought some cavalry to this battle. It's in this case it's Nagamaki. which is, they're not bad. Nagamaki being a Japanese weapon that's held like a sword, but as long as a polearm. So they do, I believe they get a bonus versus cavalry. They're kind of almost in between Naginata and Katana, which is kind of funny because Naginata is supposed to be between Katana and Yari. So I don't know, kind of interesting. They're unique to this mod, but they're from a submod for the Master of Strategy mod. Made by a friend of mine, actually, who takes units from all sorts of other overhaul mods from Shogun 2. Virtually none of the units are made solely by him. They're usually ripped from another mod with the permission of the mod author and put into Master Strategy. I'll leave a link to that. Ooh, geez. Leave a link to his mod unit collection in the description to the video. So as we see here, it's a classic Shogun 2. I gave all these units orders to come back here, and they've all decided to come into a nexus in the center and then move back, which is of course got them caught up in the melee unit charge. So not quite sure what I was doing with these guys. Oh, they're just not acting on the original order. So nothing out of the ordinary so far, unfortunately, because that happens fairly frequently. Move my general back. The enemy come forward with their initial melee attack. They're only vaguely supported by their missile units. And as you can see here, I'm bringing my veteran samurai up inside the spear square, getting them to form spear square. They've already routed. I'm not quite sure what from. And this is why it takes a bit of this, where you give a few orders in the span of one tick. Because it requires a bit of jimmying to get units exactly where you want them to. And when you do get them there, they're vulnerable to missile fire like this. If we watch. Oh. If I can get a good... Yeah, it only takes a couple volleys before the casualties start really racking up. Especially if they're not samurai and don't have decent armor. So, yes. So we're essentially down to 3/4 almost of the unit there already. And that's kind of that's the whole point of this battle recording, is to demonstrate that you've really got to bring, if in a worst case scenario and you're going up against a lot of missile units, like this is only about half the missile units, because in this mod they're I can find them. No, the Choso Kabe regular samurai, they're non-veteran samurai, get missile attacks. They get bows, and the Satake, or however you pronounce it, which is another clan, a totally new, unique clan that you can play as one of the submods for Master of Strategy. Have a similar thing with their samurai and gunpowder. But this is kind of when the missile battle started. I got my units to focus in on some of their veteran samurai. This is why gunpowder is so valuable in Master Strategy, because it just does a lot of morale damage, and I believe bows and gunpowder get classed as two different types of missiles, so you can stack under missile fire. Yeah, I think you can stack the missile attack morale debuff. As you can see, except for this unit, none of these units have been in actually any melee fighting yet, and these are already the casualty reports. So just demonstrating the point, you need to have strong missile units. In worst case scenario, you're going up against another army of another clan that's got very strong missile comp. You usually wouldn't see this sort of missile composition in campaign, but it can happen occasionally when the AI decides to, especially if it's a faction like the Chosokabe that is missile unit focused. So you really need to have as part of your composition as a sort of a not a worst case scenario, sort of a fallback to have missile units to be able to win the missile battle, and have, if you're going to use this strategy, also have enough melee units that can go into spear square to pull your missile units back and win the melee battle as well via the strategy that this video is demonstrating. So I'll quickly skip through this and put an end to my rambling. But when the enemy does attack with their melee units, you will see that I'm not sure this replay is entirely accurate, because I do vaguely remember having my veteran samurai in spear square by this point. But when the enemy do attack with their melee units, they'll come down, and yes, unfortunately, this battle didn't end up in a way to really demonstrate the need for having, say, a samurai unit in the center of your spear square, so that if your Ashigaru around the outside does get wiped out, you have still got something in the center that can hold until the end of the battle, at least. Or at the very least until they get reinforcement. It just so happens that the enemy's melee force, which was my bad, I didn't give them good enough composition in order to do so. Didn't have enough weight and killing power behind it to really necessitate that. So this is a bit of a bad example of why that's needed, but you would have seen in the previous battle why it's needed. Because if you get attacked by a hero unit and they get the sustained combat, and your gunpowder units you'll have behind them can't get a good angle of fire on them, then you can whittle down part of your front line. If that crumbles, then the enemy will filter through into your back line of missile units. So it is something you want to avoid at all costs, sort of thing. Here we have the classic cavalry charge. I'm notoriously bad for responding to that. I probably should have had cavalry ready to receive it, but again, that's my fault. And yeah, but as we'll see, as per last time, it's actually almost favourable to have the enemy cavalry charge your missile units, so you can pull your missile units back through your spear squares and have the cavalry get stuck on the spear squares whilst you fall back, set up your gunpowder, or your gunpowder and bows in this case, and fire into the enemy cavalry. Which is what happened in both this battle, and if you watch closely, in the previous battle that happened as well, with the enemy opening with the cavalry charge. As we see here, you've got Naginata Ashigaru. If I do get some fire on them, which is a disadvantage of the unit AI in here in Shogun 2, is that occasionally with this strategy you'll get the gunpowder unit firing on a unit that's not right in front of them, i.e. the non-optimal one for it to be firing on. However, that was a good volley. We got a good volley off there, and that's just a volley you kind of expect from gunpowder. But the great thing about this strategy is you can keep getting volleys like that all through the melee fight. As you can see, they're trying to come through to my missile units, but they get caught on here. And they wheel around and head into the back of my spear square, whilst my gunpowder continues to fire. So that really is showing the beauty of this strategy, is that it kind of always works. I have had one time where a unit has managed to pull through, but that was when I had my missile unit so close that when they had pulled through, before they were able to be pulled back, they had reached my missile line and got engaged with it, which pulled the rest of the unit through. That was my fault. Not so much. Yeah, it really just requires good spacing of your units. Be close enough to get really point blank accurate fire, but also far enough away that that sort of thing can't happen. Here we have the enemy general. Just some regular cavalry stuff. I did have a melee unit. Here's a Gestalt, yeah. So you can see their bows in their hands. For anyone who doesn't know, that's Chosukabe Naginata samurai using bows, because they can do that in Master of Strategy, which is a really nice feature. It really makes Chosukabe quite unique. I'm surprised I was winning that battle. And that's virtually the end of the battle. They do, of course, have a contingent of melee units left, which they will attack with in a moment. Apart from some shenanigans where they go around my front line there. Oh, here we are. What's happening here? Apart from that, this little shenanigans that happened over here, nothing really remarkable happens for the rest of the battle. They come in, they charge, they get shot, they die. Which is good to show you, even after the first engagement, when all my men are basically worn out, it still works. Even after they've taken what, that's decent portion of the unit gone. Yeah, decent portion. Yep, decent portion. So, looking around to 25% to, I guess, 2/5 of the unit dead. Like I was saying right at the start of this battle, demonstrating that that even when you've got units that are half dead and you've got enemies coming at you that have got full strength, strategy works to mitigate those differences in numbers and still win the battle, as you'll see here. Routing already. Tachiki. Tachi is just like a katana but longer, and it comes to a finer point, so it's better for cavalry. Thus, they have a better charge bonus. And there we go, under the whittling missile fire, because of course bows can fire over your units. Especially Master of Strategy, they have an ability to fire in a higher arc in order to minimise friendly fire. Fire directly down onto them instead of in a lower arc. Stacking under missile fire debuffs. And at this point, I've just brought all the units in for a cavalry charge to try and break the morale with this unit. Probably could have waited a bit because it has got a banzai active. But yeah, as you can see, and just have my cavalry clean up that is a sort of a disadvantage of the strategy, is the enemies may break and get to the edge of the map whilst they've still got a significant number of their unit size intact. Like, look at that, that's 2/3 of the unit still intact and they've routed. So you do want a bit of cavalry to try and mop them up so they can't come back at you next turn. So we'll have a look at the statistics, and I kind of demonstrate that, kind of show the effect of it minimising casualties. We haven't got a control sample to compare it against to show what the casualties would have been otherwise, which is probably the next step in this process to determine how effective it exactly is. At least I'll be able to show you the majority of the kills. Mind you, there was a missile battle that occurred earlier on out the front, in the front of my melee units before the main battle, so missile units would have racked up quite a few kills from that. But as you can see, pretty much all the gunpowder units over 200 kills, which, if you've got a missile unit that's killing more men than is actually in the unit, considering they don't, they frequently miss It's only a small portion of the unit that actually hits their targets, let alone kills them per volley, then you're using your missile units very effectively. Yeah, so about 150 kills per bow unit. Had a veteran Yari Yashigaru that got 116 kills, and you got 100 kills here. And of course, you've got the rest down here. Actually, what was the most kills they got? Yeah, 190 kills from one of the veteran Yumi Samurai. So like I said, veteran bow samurai, when you want something dead, very fast. So though it was fairly equivalent numbers, mainly because they had a big army and had a lot of Ashigaru, and I brought actually a couple units of samurai and cavalry. I still did lose a decent portion of my army, but the good thing is, even amongst missile units, the losses were fairly spread out, so you'll maximize your unit replenishment per turn. Spread your losses across all your units. So if I have a look at lost, yeah, so second highest losses in missile unit, missile unit, missile unit, missile unit. So as you can see, you put that down to about, say, 1.2k losses of melee units. I think it'll be fairly reasonable, and that's a pretty good result from that battle. That was essentially, apart from them not having enough melee units to really push all the way through my front line, that essentially was a worst case scenario, when you've got an enemy with quite a lot of missile units. Mind you, they didn't get a whole lot of fire throughout the entire battle onto our spear squares, but yeah, that's kind of how to deal with that and to show that it works. So yeah, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, hope you learnt something, and let me know in the comments if you found out a better way to kind of use this setup. I'd be very interested to know and be very happy to hear. Alright,